And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing a weak front out here over the west central Bering Sea. Stronger system down here south of the eastern Aleutians, bringing some rain up into that area, spreading into the Alaska Peninsula. Dry over the western Bering Sea here, dry over the interior with strong high pressure centered over just west of Eagle there. And that extends down into the Gulf of Alaska and keeping the southeast coast mostly clear and dry with a little bit lighter winds, but still gusty through the channeled areas. And those winds may pick up a little bit tomorrow here over the northern southeast coast. Otherwise, no change down in this area at all. Central eastern interior, dry, light winds. Western interior, variably cloudy with light winds, maybe some shower activity with that weak trough, and that's a maybe up over the west or the northwest coast, Noatak Valley area, maybe the Brooks Range. And rain periods of here into the Alaska Peninsula with winds gusting 40-45 miles an hour possibly. Rain, fog, drizzle here from western St. Lawrence Island down across the Pribilofs into the eastern Aleutians. And for Thursday, still a frontal boundary out here over the east central Bering Sea, more or less there. Periods of rain continue. Light rain, fog, and drizzle for the eastern Aleutians, Pribilof Islands, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound. Some areas of light snow along the Arctic coast, a couple of weak troughs up there, maybe a little breezy on the west side, but nothing too serious. And no change over much of interior Alaska here on Thursday with dry conditions from the Brooks Range all the way down to Kodiak Island with a lot of clearing here for the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin, down across the Panhandle. Look for northeast winds 15 to 20 knots on the south coast tomorrow. Central coast, northeast 10 to 15 knots. Seas running 5 to 6 feet. And the north coast, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Lynn Canal, north winds 30 knots, seas 7 feet. Stevens Passage, northwest winds at 25 knots, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. And then for Thursday, Clarence Strait, north winds 15 knots, north winds 20 knots for Stevens Passage, north winds down to 20 knots for Lynn Canal. And for the south coast, northeast winds at 15 knots, central coast, east-northeast at about 20 knots with seas running 5 feet. North coast, northeast winds at 10 knots, seas 3 to 4 feet. Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, variable winds at 10 knots, including the Barren Islands. Northeast winds 15 knots, southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay. Northern Cook Inlet, variable winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And for Thursday, Cook Inlet, variable winds, light variable winds, and east at 15 for Kamishak Bay, southeast 15 for the Barren Islands. North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, winds will be light and variable with slight seas. And for Kodiak Island, southeast to northeast winds, 15 knots for the day Wednesday. Good small craft advisories here. East-southeast winds 30 knots for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula with seas running anywhere from 2 feet in Bristol Bay to 13 feet on the Pacific side of the peninsula. And not much change on Thursday. 30-knot winds here. Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula out of the east-southeast and seas 12 to 13 feet. Kodiak Island, east winds at 20 knots. Eastern Aleutians, east to northeast winds 20 to 30 knots. Northwest winds 20 knots for the central Aleutians and west-northwest 15 to 20 knots out west. For the Thursday outlook, west-southwest at 20 to 25 knots here west of Adak. Central Aleutians, west-northwest 25 to 30 knots, seas 8 to 10 feet. Small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians, winds right out of the east there front Alaska Island at 30 knots with 7 to 12 foot seas. For the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, east winds 25 knots tomorrow, southeast 25 for St. Matthew Island. For the Pribilofs, Yukon Delta Coast, St. Lawrence Island, winds will be southeast at 20 knots. And for Thursday, St. Lawrence Islands, Yukon Delta Coast, southeast winds 20 knots, southeast 30-knot winds for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, seas up to 6 feet there. And for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, east winds 15 to 20. Gale warnings for the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow for Wednesday, especially Kaktovik Barter Island, a demarcation point, 35 knots out of the west. Central coast, southwest at 15. West side, south at 15. Small craft advisories for the Chukchi Sea, south to southeast winds at 25 knots. And for Thursday, Small craft advisories here for the Chukchi Sea. Southerlies 25 to 30 knots. Western Arctic coast, same thing. South winds 25 knots. Lighter south winds at 15 knots for the central coast. South to southeast winds at 15 to 20 knots there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast.